if if you have to leave, or if you have a friend who really wants to watch this in the future, we'll share that link with you, and you can either rewatch it or share it as necessary. So like I said, drop any questions you have as I'm going through in the chat. I will be covering a lot of material today, but I hope after the end of this about 45-minute presentation, you'll learn a little bit more about the graduate school application process and how you can really submit a strong graduate application. If you have any questions about Purdue engineering, I'm also happy to chat and answer any of those that you might have. I would say right now, I'm probably not going to do any raised hand function. So if you have any questions, please drop those into the chat directly. So, perfect. Okay, well, I am going to get started then. So what are we going to talk about today? 2 participants raised hand. Okay, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the application process as a whole. And then we're going to talk a little about timeline. We do have the majority of the students who are seniors on the call today, but there are some students who might be preparing a little bit more on the younger side, freshmen and sophomore. And I want to go into more detail about, for you seniors, what you should be doing right now. I'll talk a little bit about different types of degrees and make sure we are all on the same page there. And then I'll dive in a little bit more to the parts of the graduate application. I'll specifically take some time to focus on letters of recommendation and your statement of purpose. Then what I'll do is I'll move and I'll talk a little bit more about funding because we all like funding and money. But I do want to do a shout out to that later on this week. My colleague, Dr. Janet Beagle, will be having a presentation on funding. So hopefully I can drop that link into the chat and share that with you as well. So the application process for graduate school is really different than the application process for your undergraduate studies. Undergraduate applications are very centralized. It's a centralized process where the university accepts your application, reviews it, and it either admits or denies you. However, the graduate school application process is actually really different, and it's very decentralized, which means that the graduate school receives your applications and then they kind of shift them and move them to your department that you're applying to, and your graduate department themselves review your graduate application. So it is a little bit different, and it's really important to read directions for the different institutions that you are applying to, because these directions really can vary. Like I said before, applications are reviewed by the professors in your department. So when you're asking like, who is seeing my application for graduate school, those are the professors themselves. They are making those decisions. And like I said, the process of the graduate application, that review is done by your department and the professors within that department. And they'll really want to know what you bring to the university. So it's really important to include, if you have any publications, you can include that. You can include any experience. You can include any relevant achievements, your academic background, any potential, any contributions you've made. You really want to emphasize that in your graduate application. So you apply, you send in your application, and then that final decision is actually sent back by the central graduate's office. And that process for reviewing and admitting students can take months. So it takes a good amount of time, and I'll review that timeline shortly. And it's really important to watch any deadlines. All universities will have different deadlines to their graduate programs, and even within a university, different disciplines can also have different deadlines. So it's really important to watch those deadlines and check any minimum requirements that any programs might have. And I always want to throw this disclaimer in that that with COVID, a lot of institutions and a lot of departments and graduate programs are changing how they look at the GRE and if they even look at the GRE. So it's really important to check your graduate program's websites that you're applying to. If there's no information about whether it's required or not, all programs have a graduate program administrator you can reach out to that I'll talk about shortly. So reach out to different graduate programs if you are having any issues there. So, and okay, great. So another important piece of the application process is that the application is only complete when all of your application pieces have been received, and I will talk about that shortly. Okay, and I do see a couple of you guys have hands up in the chat. Can you hear me okay? Can someone message, send me a chat? Is everything okay? Or Emma, can I allow you to talk? Do you have a question? Oh, I see lots of hands. I'm assuming that is a good thing and you guys can hear me. Yeah, Emma, are you there? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, the chat is still disabled.
Oh, okay. See, that's a bummer. How do I change that? Okay, well, since the chat is disabled and you guys can't even message me, which is really stinky, what we'll do at the very end, we will use this raise hand feature to communicate any questions. Okay, thanks so much, Emma. I'm going to do that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we will keep moving on, and sorry that the chat function is not working. That is weird. So we are going to keep moving, and we will just take questions at the end then. Okay, so the application process. So again, it is really different from your undergraduate applications. And so you really need to be thinking a lot about the timeline. So when you are a senior, it's really important to think about this timeline in relationship to your senior year. So the most common entry term for a graduate application is fall. Okay, wait, actually, I think I figured this out. You can chat with me now, I'm pretty sure. Okay, multitasking. Okay, so most common, and thank you guys. The most common entry term is fall. And what that means is that if you're looking to start, yes, chats, if you're looking to start in fall, so in September after you graduate, you need to be thinking about your graduate application the September before. A year before you want to start in graduate school, you need to be thinking about graduate school and preparing for your applications. So in September or in October, if you are required to take any standardized exams, you want to be taking them then. You want to be thinking about the different essays and different components of your graduate application. And you want to start requesting letters of recommendation and requesting transcripts. Like I said, the most common entry term is fall. But there are graduate application deadlines that start in December, or graduate programs that start in December. When that happens, a lot of times the application for December grads are due in October. Starting in December can be really challenging because there's far less funding that goes in. It goes to support students who are starting kind of off cycle. So just keep that in mind. So as you're planning to start your graduate program, that next fall in August, you want to be thinking about standardized exams, really preparing your application on September and October. When November comes, you want to start thinking about completing your graduate application. Like I said, most deadlines for a traditional fall start graduate program will be in December. So you want to complete your application in November. You want to remind your letter of recommendation writers in November, and you want to make sure that your application is complete before the deadline. That means having all of your application pieces be in and have your application be submitted. After that process happens, you submit your application, and what happens is it goes to the review committee, and graduate programs will begin making decisions on students anywhere between January and March. And they will ask you to accept an offer by April 15th. April 15th is a standard deadline that all graduate programs across the country, the Council of Graduate Schools, says you cannot force students to make any decisions on graduate programs before that April 15th deadline. So don't feel rushed in that process. You have time to get all of your different graduate application decisions back, and you're able to make an informed decision. So you definitely will be thinking about that timeline as you go through the process of applying to either master's or PhD programs. So I want to quickly go over some jargon that happens at Purdue, but also some different offices that can be really helpful to you in this process. So like I said, you'll apply directly to the Purdue University Graduate School. And then there is the college graduate office, like myself and some of my colleagues, who really work closely with those individual disciplines or graduate school offices. So like I said, the Central Grad School manages that application system. We kind of work as a liaison between the Central Graduate School and between the specific graduate school offices or the graduate offices within your discipline. These individual school graduate offices, they are the ones who are setting the admissions requirement. And like I said, reviewing your applications. They are the ones that are sending admissions recommendations to the grad school. So those are recommendations either to admit you or to deny you admissions. So our individual schools or disciplines are the ones who, again, do that whole review process. If you're ever unsure of who to reach out to, you can certainly reach out to me if it is a very discipline or graduate program specific question. All of our individual school graduate offices have people and graduate administrators in those disciplines who can help you get the answers that you need. So do not hesitate to reach out to people who work in these offices. They can help you. So I'm going to transition just a little bit. Yes, Caitlin, these slides will be shared, and I am recording this, so I will share that out after. I am going to very quickly make sure that we are on the same page in terms of what are the different types of degrees that you can obtain. So there are the master's degree, and there is the PhD. So master's degree, typically, at least at Purdue, it's 30 credits. It can have two different types of flavors: thesis, which is research and courses, or non-thesis, which is courses only. Master's can be anywhere from 1 to 2 years, and will open doors to different careers requiring some specialization, some management, some research. So it really depends on what your end game is, whether you go for a master's or a PhD. If you're like really stoked about research and you like research, I definitely recommend coming in to a PhD program or a doctorate of philosophy. You can come in either directly into a PhD program known as the direct PhD, or you can obtain your master's degree first and then start in the PhD program. So these are, again, it's a longer program. It's about 3 to 5 years after your master's, about 90 credits. And it is a research-based program. So you'll come into your PhD, you'll do research. At the end of all the research that you complete, you will write it all up into a dissertation, which is kind of a fancy name for a thesis. And I like to say, you will hear me say this time and time again, a PhD is a license to think, and it's a license to think critically. Whether you're in academia or industry, employers absolutely love working with people with PhDs because they know that you can think, they know that that you can do your homework, your research, and really move the world forward. So a PhD can really open doors into careers in research and development and leadership. Like I said, academic positions. You could become a professor. You could go into industry R&D. You could go into entrepreneurship. You could go into science policy or science and technology policy. There's just so much that you can do with a PhD. The sky is the limit. So how do you apply to these master's and PhD programs? And what are the parts of the graduate application that you need? So the application process really consists of starting an online application form and paying an application fee. You will have to submit a statement of purpose and letters of recommendation, which I'll go into shortly. You will have to submit standardized test scores if those are required for your program. If you're an international student studying outside the United States, where English is not a language that is spoken in that country, You will have to submit an English proficiency exam, such as TOEFL or IELTS. You'll submit your transcript that has your grade point average or GPA on a 4.0 scale. You'll submit your previous work experience, research experience, any activities, leadership, outreach, clubs, publications, and you will also submit your resume and CV. One thing I do want to make sure you are all aware about, because I did not know this when I was applying to graduate programs, is that graduate application fee waivers exist. What that means is that you can find ways to waive your application fee to apply for your graduate application. What I would recommend is you need to do this early and figure out to determine whether universities you plan to apply to really have any that are applicable to you. So here, like for example, if you Google Purdue University graduate application fee waiver, it'll direct you to our Central Graduate School admissions webpage with a list of application fee waivers. While this particular seminar does not qualify you for a graduate application fee waiver, I will be sharing out information at the end of this presentation for an event that you can get one. So know that graduate application fee waivers are out there, but they are not widely advertised. And so, like I said, definitely check out some of our events at the end. So I'm going to dig in a little bit more to different pieces of the different parts of the application itself. So the first are different standardized tests. Like I said, this will really vary based off the program that you are interested in applying to. Some programs do not require the GRE, but you should double check. There are also subject tests that a program might require, but like I said, this is becoming less and less common. So check into the admissions requirements for the graduate program that you're interested in. In terms of the application parts, the parts of the graduate application, like I said, you'll have to submit your GPA, transcripts, and diploma. So this will include an official list of classes and your scores or your grades in those. If you're coming from an international university, you'll have to submit a copy of your diploma. It's really important that the name on your transcript should match the name, so spelling and order of the name on your application. And like I mentioned before, your GPA should be in a 4.0 scale. I see a couple questions on the content I've covered so far. So I'm just going to address those, and then I'm going to move on to letters of recommendation and statement of purpose. Question about is an official transcript required or is an unofficial accepted? It really depends on the program. Some programs will allow you to submit an unofficial transcript, but then will require you to submit an official transcript if you are admitted. If you are an international student studying in the US, you do not need to submit an English proficiency exam, so a TOEFL or the IELTS. That is not required at Purdue. You should definitely look into that for the other institutions that you plan to apply to. But if you're an international student studying in the United States and you confer a degree from an institution in the United States within the last, I want to say 24 to 36 months, then you can definitely, then you do not need to take English proficiency. So I'm going to get back to a question on advisors because we will get there. Okay. Can you apply to schools, then attend after gap year? Sometimes you are allowed to defer for a certain number of semesters, but you'd want to double check with that program, so that could allow you to take a gap year. Okay. Do current juniors need to apply this semester or for the +1 master's program? So that would really depend on the institution and the particular, if you're talking about a BS, MS, a dual degree, you have to look at that specific recommendation for the discipline that you're applying to. So in terms of just to make sure that we're clear about the transcript process. You will actually, obviously you're submitting your transcript in like the middle of the fall semester, so you're not going to have all of your fall grades. So that's why you'll typically submit your current transcript within the middle of the fall semester. And then you will, if you are admitted, you will resubmit your final grades at the end. So you really want to make sure that you keep your grades up within your fall and your spring semester. Okay. If your GPA is not on a 4.0 scale, then there are some GPA converters out there. So I would recommend looking into that. And typically application fee waivers, they last for a couple of years, at least at Purdue, but that will really, really vary. Okay. So I'm going to move on. Because I think a lot of these questions we will get to. Okay, so you guys are really dropping lots in. Okay, so you can apply direct PhD. So just look into the program you're interested in. You want to make sure your resume is complete as possible. And some schools do require a minimum for the graduate application process in terms of your GPA. So you'll really want to look into that, and you really want to make sure, like Purdue has a minimum, our Central Graduate School sets that for the graduate application process. So you have to have a 3.0 in order to apply. So you really want to make sure that you're hitting that minimum, at least if you're interested in applying to Purdue. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving on. And yes, George, application fee waivers are available to international students. Okay, so we're gonna keep moving on, and I hope to get to more of your questions shortly. So, okay. So letters of recommendation. So you need to submit 3 letters of recommendation for a graduate application. And a letter of recommendation is a letter from a professor recommending you to a graduate program. So it may actually include a form and a fee, and it's really, really important to have letters, not only it's important to have letters from faculty members, because faculty really like to hear from other faculty in terms of the application process. So they're really highly valued in this admissions process by the admissions committee. Typically want 3. A common question that I typically get is, can I have a mentor from a co-op or internship write me a letter? Yes, you can, but it really depends on what type of degree they hold. For example, if you're interested in applying to a PhD program, but they only hold a master's degree, then you really want to weigh that. How can they speak to your strengths in a PhD program if they have not gone through it themselves? So it's really important to reach out to faculty members and ask them if they can write you a strong letter and have a nice wide breadth of different people writing them for you. And they can be from engineering, or they can be from any discipline. So I want to share 5 tips for letters of recommendation writers. It's really important to get to know your current professors, because they will be writing you the letters. Like I said, you want to select professors who can talk about different strengths that you might have. Maybe one professor has seen you do research. Maybe another professor can talk about your strength in a lab course. You want to give plenty of notice. So what I always recommend in the graduate application process is that you compile the list of schools you're interested in applying to. Make an Excel spreadsheet, the school, the deadline, what program you're applying to, how they will be receiving kind of that letter of recommendation ask, whether it's going to be an email, it might be an email directly from the system. And then very important, deadlines. And you want to prepare your letter of recommendation writers with a copy of your resume, maybe a little statement about why you're interested in grad school. Give your letter writer all of the tools that they need to write a good and strong letter. So make their job easy. You want to make their job as easy as possible. And then what you want to do is you want to follow up. So if it's a week before the deadline and you see in the system that you do not have or like a letter is missing, then follow up with that faculty member. And like I said, typically you will ask for 3 letters of recommendation. So if you're applying to 5 schools, you might ask those 3 faculty members for 5 letters, right? That you will have them submit their letter 5 times to 5 different universities. So I'd always recommend 3 letters. I wouldn't recommend any more unless you have a particularly strong 4th letter writer. So when you're asking for a letter, you want to, again, make it as personal as possible, meet in person or, chat on the phone or video call them, make an appointment and keep it and ask them, right? Are you willing to write me a strong letter of recommendation? Like I mentioned, give them all of the tools that they need to write a strong letter and follow up. So I'm going to move on to the statement of purpose now, which is your essay explaining why you're really interested in graduate school. This can really vary, like I said, from university to university. At Purdue, we ask for a statement of purpose. This can be a little different than a personal statement. A personal statement is more of like a story about you, that I did this and I did that from growing up, versus a statement of purpose, which is stating your purpose for pursuing a graduate degree. So it's really important to talk about why you're interested in a graduate degree. Some typical specs, it'll be about 300 to 500 words. So this is about a page. It's not very long, guys. So it's a lot of information in a very little amount of space. And it demonstrates your ability to communicate. And you want to use simple, direct language. You want to really make sure you're getting your point across. And this statement will explain your purpose for pursuing graduate study, your purpose for studying at a particular institution. So why are you interested in studying at Purdue? And that should be very specific, right? If I would not recommend saying Purdue, it's world renowned, like cradle of astronauts. Yes. I will tell you, everyone writes that. So why is it exciting for you? Why are you excited about pursuing a graduate degree and studying at this particular institution? What faculty work here? What resources are here that no one else has? So talk about that. You'll discuss your research interests. You'll talk about what you're really excited about bringing to the table. What experiences do you have that you want to bring here? And you'll talk about your career goals. How does this graduate degree fit into the bigger picture of your career and your career journey? And then you can also take like one sentence and talk about like any special circumstances that you might have faced. So for example, during COVID, maybe someone in your family was sick and you had to take care of them. Maybe your GPA was really low that semester. One sentence, guys. Talk about one sentence. So you can definitely include that there. It's really important to show mutual benefit. So why should we, or why should a faculty member on the admissions committee choose you, and why are you choosing us? So make sure that's crystal clear. And it's really important. There's a lot in a small space. Don't be gimmicky. State your purpose. And you will have to tailor your statement of purpose for each and every university you apply to. So I'll encourage you to answer 3 questions in your statement of purpose. What have you done? And what did you learn from it? What are your future plans for this degree? So what are your career goals? And why are you selecting this institution or program to meet your goals? So it's very important to address all of these. And what else should be in your statement of purpose? I'll encourage you to briefly describe your different experiences, and I'm going to share some different phrasing that you can use in your statement of purpose. And so, one thing might be like, as an undergraduate researcher in X, I did blank, and therefore I can do blank. So another scenario is, since taking a class in exploratory data, right, I've now been able to Now I'm ready to hit the ground running in my PhD, and now I'm ready to, dive deeper into like field data. Maybe another one is during my time as the president of the Society of Women Engineers, I learned to maybe lead a team of 20 people. So now I'm confident in my ability to manage myself and others as a grad student. So there's a number of different ways that you can phrase your current experiences in a way that really shows your potential contribution as a graduate student. So I encourage you to do that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but like I said, I'll be sharing a recording of this after to all the students who have registered. So I would encourage you to include, what degree you plan to seek and why. So why are you interested in obtaining a PhD in biomedical engineering? You want to talk about your interests. You want to express some flexibility, but really kind of zone in on a research area. So maybe you're like passionate about Professor C's work, but really you're just really excited about that field in general. Like say that. And you can talk about your career plans rather than names of employers. So for example, going into maybe you're interested in university research, maybe you're interested in one of these things versus like, I want to work at Blue Origin after. So talk about kind of your general career plans. Okay. And again, not going to go into a lot of detail here, but it's really important to customize. You really want to stay around that 800 words, 500 to 800 words. You really don't want to go much over, but again, you want to follow the directions of the graduate program that you're applying to. You want to show that you've done some research on the program, name drop some faculty if they're of interest to you, and then really avoid overstating the obvious. For example, a graduate program knows if they're ranked, number 4 in the country or number 1 in the country. You don't need to reiterate that. That's wasting some of the space that you could be including other things. So a statement of purpose is a lot in a small space. So you want to be brief, but you want to be explicit. You want to include details and facts. I always recommend that you read through and what you do is read it out loud. Say, is this how I would, actually say this in person? Remove any unnecessary adjectives. Don't be afraid to cross things out or remove them. It's really important to revise and edit and have lots of people revise and edit. So test each sentence individually. Is it important to tell someone that? Does it sound natural? You really want to proofread and have everyone else read it. You cannot have enough people read your statement of purpose. Okay, so I'm going to watch on the time. I am going to try and take some questions on statement of purpose. I've seen a couple come in. So let me try to get through these. I know you're all going to type and feel free to hang out because I know some of you guys have written similar questions. So for letters of recommendation, should we ask the same 3 professors for letters and for all graduate programs? Additionally, would a non-engineering or non-STEM professor be a good choice for an engineering application? You really want to think about the different strengths that those people can talk about in terms of the application, the letters that they're writing you. I would recommend asking the same 3 letters or same 3 professors for letters for all of your graduate applications. It's kind of a logistical nightmare if you ask different ones. So I would recommend using the same faculty members as letter writers. And so another question I get, so can recommenders be program directors of research programs if you're interested in a PhD program? I would always recommend that that recommenders are faculty members. So some questions I get sometimes is, can a PhD student write me a letter of recommendation? I would say no. Your PhD student or graduate mentor should work with your faculty member or PI to write you a letter of recommendation. So you definitely want people who can write you strong letters. I see a couple questions about like statements of purpose being 1,000 words, I challenge you to write your statement of purpose and then cut it down. You probably include a lot of things that you don't need to include. So test each sentence individually. Is each sentence driving back to the main point or kind of the thesis of your statement of purpose, which is why you are interested in graduate school. A lot of times there's a lot of things that you can cut out of there that you don't need to include. And remember, our faculty members are reading a lot of these letters. So you really want to make sure that you're making it as streamlined and as easily accessible to faculty members as possible. In terms of mentioning faculty members in your statement of purpose, should you email those faculty members beforehand? If they don't have funding or graduate students or they don't have grad students, should we not mention them? You can certainly reach out to faculty members before you apply. Sometimes they won't respond, that happens. And sometimes they will. And sometimes you can start some really great conversations. So I definitely recommend reaching out to them. And in terms of, if you have very little experience when you're applying to graduate programs, you talk about some of the strengths that you have. Maybe you've taken a class in that particular area. Maybe you've taken a graduate level class. Maybe that really excites you. And maybe you don't have a lot of hands-on experience, but maybe you can talk about why you're really passionate about that. In terms of flipping back to letters of recommendation writers, I definitely recommend that they are faculty, but they do not have to be from your current university. Sometimes postdocs can be good letter writers. They're in that kind of vague area. I would still recommend maybe your postdoc work with your PI to write you a letter. In terms of okay. Yes, I think we covered most of the questions. So I'm going to keep moving on because I am watching time and I still will do some Q&A at the end. So we are going to move on to funding. And like I said, I'm not going to talk a lot about this because Dr. Janet Beagle, one of my colleagues, is holding a session on Thursday. I can drop that into the chat in a few minutes. But bottom line, there's funding out there. There's money out there for you to complete your graduate degree, your master's and or PhD. About 70% of Purdue's full-time graduate students do receive funding. You can imagine that the majority of the funding will go to our PhD students first, and about 50% of our master's students are funded. There's two different ways to look at funding. There's both external funding and internal funding. There, in terms of external funding, there's different fellowships and grants. Sometimes employers can fund their employees, or companies can fund their employees to come back and do their master's degree. That might be online in a non-thesis master's degree, or that might be on campus itself. So there's also different government funding. Various organizations have different fellowships and funding mechanisms. And like I said, if you are pursuing a non-thesis master's degree, so no research, or if you're thinking about doing a professional master's or an online program, there's very little funding associated with those programs, mostly because you're not doing research, you're not kind of doing something that kind of moves that research enterprise forward. So a lot of times non-thesis master's students, online master's students will be taking out loans or having their employer pay for their graduate degree, or they might even be self-paying, might self-fund. There's also, on the flip side, there's internal funding. So these come in the form of fellowships and grants that come straight from the university itself. There's also assistantships, and so there's a couple different forms of assistantships. There's RAs or research assistantships. There's TAs or teaching assistantships, and there's administrative assistantships, typically called GAs or graduate administrative assistantships. And it's really important when you're thinking about graduate school and when weighing funding offers to not forget that cost of living is a really important factor for each location. And so living expenses can really vary drastically and make a big difference kind of in your financial situation. So I'll just kind of put this out, in 2018, when I was in the Boston area pursuing my PhD, my rent was about $1,500 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. When I moved to Indiana later on that year, I was in a 2-bedroom apartment for $700 a month. So cost of living in the United States can really vary based off of where you are located. So you want to keep that in mind when you're looking at funding and how much your funding you'll be offered. The funding process. So when you put in a graduate application, with that whole process we just talked about, you'll automatically be considered for some fellowships and assistantships as part of the admissions process. So there are some fellowships and assistantships that might have a separate application, and those are things that you also want to look at. These might be external. So for example, you can hear all about it on Thursday. The National Science Foundation has a graduate research fellowship program. There's also a GEM fellowship that is typically open to students, domestic students in the United States. There are also various fellowships for Purdue undergraduate students who want to stay here at Purdue for a graduate degree, such as the Chappell Fellowship. And we also have the Purdue Doctoral Fellowship here at Purdue that funds many of our PhD students. So definitely there's a lot of different options out there for funding. But like I said, you want to really kind of check in with the program. If you have any questions, you always want to check with the graduate program you're applying to. Some programs will expect you to find specific faculty to support you from the very beginning. So when you're coming into a graduate program, it's really important to read their program website, learn whether you're coming in directly matched with a faculty member. Does your admissions, really depend on them having funding? And you want to have those conversations early. And then also for PhD programs, many programs will actually have admitted student visits where you can come and you can meet with professors. So I know, for example, our chemical engineering program and our materials engineering program here at Purdue Engineering, they kind of what I would call an umbrella program, where you come in and you don't have to be directly paired with a faculty member. But then you are within your first couple months, you make those connections and you join those research groups. So you really want to learn the structure of the graduate programs that you're applying to. And you can definitely reach out to different professors you might be interested in working with. So I'm going to quickly go through contacting professors in their own words. And Emma, I would encourage you to Google, right? But no, Purdue Aerospace, I think, has that direct apply. So you really want to know the faculty member you're working with. So contacting professors in their own words. I'm going to go through a couple different scenarios here of some student feedback we've gotten over the years. So here on the screen, you can see I didn't have to be interviewed before being accepted. However, to find my advisor, I guess you could say I had unofficial interviews. So you can hear that a student maybe reached out to a faculty member, had a good connection early, and then applied and then had kind of these unofficial interviews. So making a network and having connections can be really, really helpful. And that's something that you can definitely start nice and early, and that's certainly something you can start right now. Another student said, individual professors have a lot of power in choosing which students get accepted. Find a professor you can work with and get along with well, and you have a good chance of getting in. So this again speaks to the role of faculty members and professors on those admissions committees. If you have a strong working relationship with a faculty member and they're excited to work with you, or they know you're a good student in that class, or you have someone at your institution who's friends with them, and you have a really strong letter of recommendation, those faculty members can really go to bat, I will say, for you, and they can and they can really kind of help in that admissions process. Another student said, it's okay to not know everything. Professors do not expect that from you, but you should be familiar with what they do. It can be really easy to get nervous when talking to professors who are experts. Once I remember that they're human too, it helps to take some of the edge off my nerves. So again, if you already had all this amazing knowledge that comes with a master's or PhD, you would not be getting the master's or PhD. Faculty members realize that. You're not expected to know everything. But like the student said, you want to start to learn what you do and don't know and be open about that, and be unafraid to ask those questions to faculty members, and be unafraid to ask those questions to current graduate students and postdocs in those different research groups. So again, remember that faculty are people too, and that it's okay to have those conversations. I love this one. It felt more like a first date than a formal interview. Again, you can get really nervous talking with faculty members, but sometimes you got to push through that and ask what you need to do. Ask the questions you need to ask to make sure that it's a good fit for not only you, but also the faculty, for not only the faculty member, but also you. Okay, last one. It's just as important to have a good fit with your future advisor as it is to find the right research. Some professors will not be right for you, and that is okay. So this particular student is really talking about the importance of not only that research fit, but also the mentorship and the advising experience. You could be in love with the research, but if that professor doesn't mentor you in a specific way, then maybe they're not the best fit for you. So it's really important to have a conversation about mentorship and what your expectations are as well before you start your graduate program, and while you're trying to find your particular home. So I'm not going to go through these really in depth, but when you're reaching out to professors, I encourage you, pick 1 to 3 faculty members and start out there. So do not email blast a whole bunch of faculty. Do your research first. Keep your email short and polite. Really make sure you've done your homework on their research, and bring it up in that email that you send out to them. Do not just email faculty member to ask for funding. They get a lot of emails. And if your only question is, hey, will you fund me? Why would they, right? Like you haven't connected with them on any front. So make sure you're starting a discussion centered around research, and then it can grow out from there. So if you have any non-research, kind of faculty focused questions, I would really encourage you to email graduate contacts. I encourage you to develop a list of schools and to do your research, and to talk with literally everyone, professors, current professionals in your field, current grad students, mentors, advisors. Talk with them about your list, talk to them about your research, talk to them about your career life goals. Really, really important. In terms of this process of reaching out to professors and researching different graduate school programs, it's never too early to do this. If you reach out to faculty now, which you can do, and you don't get a reply, it might just be because they're busy. It's okay to send a follow-up email 1 week later. Some faculty members won't reply, and that's just how they are. What you can do is then submit your graduate application and then follow up with them and say, hey, Professor X, I just submitted my graduate application to Purdue's Mechanical Engineering PhD program. I would love to talk with you more about your research, and then see if you can start a 10-minute conversation or 15-minute conversation on Zoom or someplace else, or maybe in person when you come visit them. So, it's never too early to start. And, in terms of kind of timeline, it might be that you submit your application in December and then you send out a couple of other follow-up emails. That's okay. So my recommendation for you this fall is to start early, right? You guys are already on the ball, are already on top of it. It's, it's September. It's never too early to start. Start drafting your statement of purpose. Start preparing for the GRE if you need them. If you're interested in applying to external fellowships like the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, the NSF-GRFP, start those. It's very, very cool. Hold yourself accountable to any deadlines that you set. And, again, if you're still like, if you're still unsure about your career goals and you're like, how do I put this into my statement of purpose? And if you're still unsure if grad school's for you, then like I said, talk to as many people as possible. Learn different career journeys. See if it's your next step. And I really encourage you, continue to prepare. And graduate school might be for you. I did mention at the beginning of this presentation that I'd be sharing an event where you can get a graduate application fee waiver. That is our Purdue Engineering Virtual Graduate Showcase. So it is fully online, so you can join in anywhere in the world. There's a free registration. There's a free application fee waiver if you come and participate. So you'll have to actually log on and do things. But if you come and participate, you can get a free application to Purdue. It'll be 2 days. There's a couple workshops. We'll have info sessions with our specific engineering graduate discipline. So if you want to learn more about aero-astro, come to the showcase. Come chat with the folks who administer the program themselves. You can network. There's a poster session on Gather Town, so that'll be really cool. You can see some of the research that's happening here on campus and more broadly across the country. So I will share this link out in the chat, but it is right here as well. I'll share that out once I stop this presentation. I'd also encourage you to stay engaged with us. So we have a YouTube channel which has a lot of similar information that I shared today. And then, I really encourage you to review websites and talk with professors. And keep in touch with us. So like I said, on Thursday, my colleague, Dr. Janet Beagle, will have a whole presentation like this on funding. And we can certainly share that out with you. And if you are currently studying in the United States, I really would encourage you and you're not a senior right now, to think about coming to Purdue through our SURF program, which is our summer undergraduate research program. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing, maybe, and I'm going to quickly drop the link into the chat for the graduate showcase. And this should go to everyone. And I would encourage you again to come to that. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to drop that into the chat. So Abraham, I see that you're asking what day the undergraduate poster session is for the virtual grad showcase. I believe that is on Monday, so on September 26th. And that's going to actually be with undergrads and grads. So it'll be very, very cool. So could you talk a little bit more about SURF at Purdue? Yeah, so summer undergraduate research, that is open to all students who are continuing their undergraduate studies. So it's unfortunately not open to seniors who graduate, but that application process opens typically December, January. You can apply in December or January, and then you can come to Purdue over the summer and do research. So you'll need to submit kind of a statement of interest, like a letter of interest, and one letter of recommendation for that. You can't copy the link. I will, maybe you can retype it then. ENGR grad, www.engr.purdue.edu/grad showcase, or Google Purdue Engineering Virtual Grad Showcase, and it should be one of the things that pop up. Yeah, so getting back to the question about resumes, are 2-page resumes okay, or is it recommended to only have a 1-page resume? Thanks for that question. So I would recommend, it depends on what program you're applying to. So if you're applying to more of a professional master's program where the end goal is industry, then maybe you want a little bit more of an industry type resume. If you're thinking about applying to a PhD program, then what I would recommend is moving something more into a CV type format. So maybe it is more than one, maybe your resume or CV is more than 1 page, and you include things like your presentations or maybe any publications that are coming up or any conferences you've attended. So if you Google it like academic CV, then you can definitely learn more about what that looks like. And like I said, faculty members reviewing these applications. So if you put it into a format that they know, that can sometimes be really helpful, especially if you are interested in potentially pursuing an academic track like that. Question. So it seems like all grad school applications are due in December. Is there any benefit to applying earlier than the deadline? How early, if so? Most programs will wait until their application deadline to start reviewing graduate applications. So I don't think that there's any benefit to applying early. But I would recommend the benefit to applying early is that you get your application in and complete before the deadline. So I know my goal, because I went from my undergraduate studies directly into my PhD, my goal was to get all of my graduate applications done by Thanksgiving, because I knew that early December was finals. So I didn't want to have to juggle finals and my graduate application. So what I'd recommend is really focusing and setting a timeline for yourself and making sure that you get your application in really as early as possible. I would recommend November if you can, if you have the ability to do so. Question, are both the master's thesis and non-thesis considered a professional master's? That is a really great question. Only some non-thesis programs are considered professional masters. So anything that includes a thesis is typically not a professional master's. Professional master's degrees typically have more of, I'm going to say, that professional feel. So sometimes you're doing more management courses, things that kind of go hand in hand with engineering and more of that business track. So that's what you can expect for the professional master's degrees. And because you're taking classes that are more of those management, they typically, you're not doing research with those types of degrees. Can your current employer write a letter of recommendation? Again, it's really going to depend on the person that you want to write that letter. Do they have a PhD? Can they write you a strong letter? I would still always recommend you have at least 1 to 2 letters from faculty members who can talk about kind of how you are in the classroom. Can my references be written by senior lecturers? So that really, again, depends on what role. What have they seen you do? I would always recommend, if you're applying to a research-based program, that you are including, someone who's seen you do some research, or at least be active in a lab-based course. Okay. If the application is due before the spring semester, is there a way to show what classes we would be taking in the spring? What would we do if we don't know what specific class we are going to take in the spring? A lot of times, if you're registered for classes, that will show up on your transcript when you pull that for your graduate application. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I know we're at time.